Namaskar and welcome to this exciting show of Sattology debunking mythology. All of us have been working very hard over the last 1 year to prove to the American academics and also other Western academics in UK that Indian history, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Veda, Puran, these are Sattology, not mythology. Mythology tag has been put on them, and we can see that in South America, if you go to Wikipedia and other places, their entire ancient religion is referred to as mythology. Today I have a very, very special guest, my mentor. I consider him as my mentor, and also I listen to all his talks and help whatever I can in his movement. And today this very special guest is going to talk to us what history needs to be told, what needs to be rewritten, and how the entire conspiracy of defaming Vedic culture has been initiated and it's being widely practiced even in India today. So without delay, let us welcome him. Without delay, you once you see him, you know who I'm talking about. Let us welcome Shri Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Namaskar, Dr. Swamy. So, Dr. Swamy, you have been an icon for many youth in India today, and particularly in the area of, you have spoken in many of your lectures, there's a need to rewrite the history of India.
Yeah.
And I think from a major politician, you're the first one who has always emphasized on this.
Yeah.
So what history do you think needs to be retold or rewritten?
Well, first of all, the history was written by the British, and British promoted scholars, including those Indians who were educated in Cambridge and Oxford. And that history has to be replaced by the original history, which we have had in our Puranas and our various scholars of, in various universities that we had in our nation. And that is based on facts. Essentially, the history that requires to be written is one that, deliberately undermines the identity of an Indian. And that is, they say that, in fact, there was a remark by one of these scholars that the only thing definite about India is that it has never been one nation, it's never been one people, it's never been one land. So, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Yes.
Okay. So, therefore, what is happening is that the whole idea was to say that India is a land which has been invaded frequently. It doesn't have an identity of its own. And originally there were a group of people called the Dravidians. And then the Aryans came from the Khyber Pass, perhaps from Central Asia. And they defeated the Dravidians and drove them south. And this was then of course the Mughals came and then the British came. So India is a land which is like a parking lot. Whoever wanted to come here came and parked and looted this place. And then, therefore the Indians don't have any grievance because we did nothing to the so-called land called India. Now that's not what is the history. India has the longest surviving civilization. And this, the UNESCO itself, which has tabulated 46 civilizations, says that other civilizations disappeared. The Iranian Zoroastrian civilization was destroyed by the Islamic invasion, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Egypt, and of course, in Europe, the Christian civilization brought in through the Middle East after the birth of Christ. That also transformed the local religions of Europe. But in India, all these invasions never came to anything. It is undeniable that India was a land of Hindus. And it allowed for many schools to flourish because it believed that all religions lead to God. So the Buddhists came, the Buddhists were a little conservative in putting certain very strict restrictions, particularly the Hinayana Buddhism, and later on, under the influence of Hinduism and Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, it became Mahayana Buddhism, which became just another sort of almost like another branch of Hinduism. Then there was Jains, and then there were Sikhs. And that's why in our constitution, Article 25 defines a Hindu as someone who is either a Sanatani, or he's a Buddhist, or he's a Sikh, or he's a Jain. And in my opinion, Zoroastrians also, their gathas and so on have so much similarity and so many common ideas that many of us, and of course the Zoroastrians may not accept this, but many of us think that Zoroaster actually originally was in India, and then he had different opinion and he went to Iran. In Ramayana, Kaikeyi, who is the mother of Bharat, she was from Iran. And so, Iran has been very, very close to India over the centuries. And so, but anyway, during the British period, they managed to create a separate identity for them, whereas all through the Zoroastrians have had very, very close connections with Hindus. So there's no Aryan Dravidian racial distinction. Why? Because all DNA studies conducted in India, reported in international journals, they all say that Indians have only one basic DNA, and that DNA is common, and therefore Indians are one. They didn't come from anywhere else. That's what modern science says. More and more things in modern science, we are getting clarification. So I would like our history books to reflect all this. If you look at the history book also, and then I will go on to your next question. But before that, let me tell you that the period from Akbar to Aurangzeb, which is the core of the Islamic Mughal rule, is only about 150 years. And it was not all India, it was part of India that they ruled. A big part, but still part of India. But the Vijayanagara Empire, which covered a larger area and lasted 300 years, there's no mention in our history textbooks. The great contribution of the Sikhs, today we are fighting with the Chinese on Ladakh and Aksai Chin, these were taken over by the Sikhs. And there was a treaty in 1842 with the Sikhs which declared Aksai Chin and Ladakh as part of India and as part of the Sikh kingdom. So where is this in our history books? So these present history books are all, to bash the Indian identity and instill a sense of inferiority complex that you are essentially either you came from abroad or you were brutalized by people from abroad, but you never had a country of your own. So that is what we want to change in our history. Give a sense of identity, teach people the importance of Sanskrit. We have a philosophy that we don't have a one-dimensional pursuit of materialism. We believe in an harmonization of pursuit of spiritualism and materialism, and that is the philosophy we have brought. And we have elevated in society those who sacrifice all their personal aggrandizement, their personal wealth and so on, and go strictly for knowledge dissemination. They are called Jnanis and Tyagis. Jnani means the learned, and Tyagi means the person who sacrificed. And that is considered the highest. And we have never held these to be based on birth, which unfortunately has happened in the last 1,000 years. These categorization of Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Shudras, these were never birth-based. And that's why the biggest rishi we had is Vishwamitra. His parents were Kshatriyas, but they were warriors. But he, by choice, became a Maharishi, in fact, Rishi of Rishis. So this identity of an Indian as an ancient Indian and Hindu religion, Hindu culture as a continuing thing, and it's the longest surviving civilization of the world. That is what we want to do, and that is why we want the history books to be read.
Very good point. And you mentioned many points, Dr. Swamy, there. One of the words I caught few keywords is identity. And so my question will be that, I firmly believe that's why we started this program, Sattology, where we firmly believe that the history creates identity. And you also mentioned another term called humiliating. So the purpose where they had misrepresented our history purposefully was to deny the identity. Without identity, people become almost like vegetables, rather than being any useful to anyone. So can you please comment on that?
Yes, you see, identity is what brings the country together. And there is you may have a variation in your language. Even in the United States, the way people in Boston speak English and the people in Dakota speak English is you can tell there's a difference, but that doesn't mean that it's a different language. So this is one identity. Mughals, the Islamic invasion of India was spread over 600 years. In every other country where Islam conquered a country, they have managed to convert 100% of the population into Islam. Iran is a classic example. One of the richest and most glorious civilization, which once went all the way up to Greece and conquered, I think their king Darius went and conquered Greece. That was the civilization. But after Islamic conquest, they, in 15 years, were all converted to Islam. And same thing in Mesopotamia, Babylon, Egypt. But India has 600 years of Islamic rule. Not in all of India, but in good parts of India. And succession of Islamic rulers. Even after that, India is 82% Hindu, which is unparalleled in any other country. So therefore, I would say identity is that. This is my history. It's a glorious history. We fought and fought and fought. And ultimately, Mughals were defeated. Where are today any Mughals? They've lived such big harems and created so many babies and children and so on. I don't see any Mughal who comes and says, I am descendant of Aurangzeb or I am descendant of Shah Jahan. You can find our kings, they are still there, even though we abolished royalty in our constitution. But still, the Raja of Indore, the Satara in Punjab, Patiala, Rajmata of Jaipur, Gwalior. So you can see them, despite the fact that we had to fight battles after battles. Here there's none. It's all disappeared. And so there is something special about our culture, and that we want to preserve it and modernize it. Certainly, there are many things, many practices which we don't want to continue, but that is not part of the theology. The theology is Vedas, and the Vedas are pure cerebral, and that is what we want our people to know. So that is identity.
You mentioned some very good points there. And one of the things I would like to, you have already told what needs to be changed and what doesn't need to be changed. one of the things which arise right now is that we call, we have become like coconuts in the USA. There's a big fun they make coconuts, that we are brown from outside, but internally many of us, we think in a very British way. And I think that is because we are gone away from Sanskrit. And you have emphasized a lot in your talks, and you even told my kids that how to learn Sanskrit, which is very important. So, how important is that language in building the mindset of young Indians or young global Hindus?
Well, today, if you went to Google and typed Sanskrit and artificial intelligence, one of the references will be to the Journal of Artificial Intelligence that's published by the NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Agency. And what does it say? It says that in the future, artificial intelligence, when it starts actually collating and collecting and analyzing and unifying and so on knowledge, there has to be one language in which the computer is never misled. And English couldn't be that, because if you tell the type of BUT, it is supposed to be pronounced but, and the computer, if you tell it that BUT is but, it will say but. I mean, the artificial intelligence machinery will say but. But if you put PUT, it is put. And the computer gets confused. It's like the Y2K problem we had at the end of the last century. The computer, because all the dates were in years were recorded in the last 2 years. Is in 1998 meant 98, and all that was put in the computer in 98. So when it came 2000, what will the computer do? It may go to 1900, and the whole thing will collapse. So there was a big scare on Y2K, and a lot of Indians then were given what is called as the backroom boys contracts, and our IT cell grew, and that's how we became world renowned in software, and we found a way. The Israelis were also in that, and the Americans, Israelis, and the Indians principally found a way by which the computer will not make the mistake and will go further and not backwards. So the issue is Sanskrit today, number one, is the language of the future as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. Number one. And every word of Sanskrit has a precise meaning. It doesn't have two meanings. There's no one word which has two meanings. Number two, Devanagari script is the most perfect script in terms of phonetic scripts. And if you want to say ki or you want to say ki, there's a different way. The matra is put in front or it is put after the alphabet. But in English, you'll write ki, and it'll be ki or kai. So the computer gets confused. So it's a computer language, number one. Number two, Google also reports St. James School in London, where the principal is quoted there by saying that I have made it compulsory that my young students in my school in London, which is St. James School in London, will recite Sanskrit shlokas, select Sanskrit shlokas from the age of 6 to the age of 11. And he says, I have come to the conclusion after my research that brain development among students is best if you recite Sanskrit shlokas for half an hour every morning. So, like yoga and so on, all these Sanskrit literatures today have become a very important thing. So, I'm saying that why I am in favor of learning English because it's an international language.
Correct.
But Sanskrit is the language by which we can unite India. Why? because every Indian language has a large proportion of Sanskrit words. Even Tamil has 40% words in common with Sanskrit. And I once had an argument with Karunanidhi, who said there's not a single word. I said, your own name, Karunanidhi, is Sanskrit. And the DMK's Chinnam is called, they call it Chinnam. That is Sanskrit for chin. Chin means symbol. And Chinnam is Tamil for a symbol. And it says Udayan Suryan. And
Sunrise.
Surya, rising sun.
Rising sun.
And he said, no, this is all Tamil. The Sanskrit must have stolen it from Tamil. I said, doesn't matter, it's common, no? And if you all make it compulsory to learn Sanskrit, Devanagari script, then at least the milestone writing will be common in the whole India. Otherwise, people come from Tamil Nadu to Karnataka, it's a different script, and they're all confused. So you have to have English. So if you say, I will teach Devanagari as an additional lipi, the script for languages, and Tamil can be written in Devanagari also, and at least you should know the knowledge. And you'll be surprised, there's so much similarity between the alphabets of Tamil and alphabets of Sanskrit, Devanagari. For instance, Ka, in Tamil it is just like a Ka in Sanskrit. And Ki, you put a matra. And Ku, you put a thing under the script. These are all common. So therefore, to order to unite the country, we must now progressively move. In fact, Hindi is moving very fast towards merging into Sanskrit. At the rate it is, the Sanskrit words are being used in. And you can find always a English translation in Sanskrit. You may not find it in Hindi. So therefore, I would say these are the things which make you want to not go backward but go forward, because these you are going to need in the future. Yeah. And the unity of the country which comes out of that is a very vital objective of our country.
Very well said, Dr. Swamy, and I think it resonates a lot with the audience. One thing I have in mind, which the history has been wrongly taught to us, the invaders could come to India, but Indians could never go out. If they would come on the horses via Afghanistan, there's a misconception in the minds of many Indians that we never invaded anyone else. And the question is why we did not. Because in Narada tells to Yudhishthira in Mahabharata, says that the Raja should always be prepared to invade other countries wherever they see adharma. And so the instruction is very clear over there. And I'm quoting you verbatim based on my second book. So where this misconception has been taught to Indians that we are Vasudeva, because if it is a thought of a magnanimous mind, that Vasudeva, it's the Vasudeva Kutumbakam. But for a lagu, it is said that for a small-minded person, it's a small thing. But when you're in international politics, when you're dealing with people who have small minds, sometimes you have to come down to their level and according to dharma deal with them, according to their mental conception. So all these things have come have been taught to us that we are very peaceful, we have never invaded. And I think one of the talks you said, America is rich today because of World War II, and because the war creates an industry. So we are dharmic, we are neither for war or not against it. So what do you say? Because all these things have come into the mindset of Indians, and they become so weak in terms of.
These are all products of unstructured thinking. I have any opinion. We never invaded anybody. Well, we didn't need to. If you want to know how Indians went about in other countries, just go to Google and type Hushih, Hushih. He was the president of Beijing University and later the ambassador of Kuomintang, China in Britain. And he was a great poet and a great scholar. So in 1936, Harvard celebrated its tricentennial year. And they invited scholars from all over the world. And so they invited him from China. And they asked him what subject will he like to address, because they are going to create a tricentennial volume. And so they want a speech in writing. And so therefore, they want to know the topic in advance so that they'll know how to classify it. So he said, I will speak on Indianization of China, a case of peaceful borrowing for 300 years or something. See? And people are taken aback, and indeed he gave that speech, and a copy of that speech is available to you if you go to Google, or you write to Harvard's Widener Library, and if you have a friend, you send him to the Widener's library and get a photostat copy. Or you read my book on China. I have reproduced it in large measures. What does he say? That Indians came here, they never fired a single bullet, a single arrow, and they never fired in the 19th century a single bullet. And yet they won over the Chinese, and the Chinese, digested the Hindu concepts. And he was of the view we have gone too far, and therefore we should now try and get some Western values also into our system. That was the way he said. He was, I think, himself a Christian. So therefore, go to Cambodia, you see temples. You go to Laos, you go to Thailand, you go to Indonesia. Indonesia, the 10,000 rupiah note has Ganesh in it, exactly, even though it's an Islamic nation. And even today we are finding, by the archaeological digging, statues of Vishnu and Mahesh and so on, Ganapati. All these things you find. Just now we have found it in Iraq, Ramchandraji's statue. So Indians went to spread ideas. They did not go to conquer. They certainly went with the help of the army, reached there because the army is the only one who could take them by boat and so on. But our exchanges with China, with Vietnam, and all of Southeast Asia, with Indonesia, in the West, that is the West Asia rather, all these places, and I don't know, we haven't done enough research whether we were there in Latin America. There are some people who say that we have scriptures which tell us that we went to California long before the white man came. So I'm not into that. We didn't need to evade. We had ideas, we had philosophy, and we had Ayurveda, we had yoga, we had so many things to teach. That's why we call ourselves, first we say the whole world is one, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, and we call ourselves as Vishwa Guru. We don't want to be known as conquerors. However, till the Prithviraj Chauhan was betrayed by his father-in-law, Jaichand, we never lost a battle. Umar was a caliph, was a terror. He went to Europe and conquered Spain, this, that, all through. But one day he announced, I will now go and get Hindustan. And the three kingdoms of Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Andhra, they pooled their resources, took their forces to Sindh, where the Caliph's troops had come, defeated them. And that is the only defeat Umar got, and he died of a broken heart. Alexander, the Englishman, say he came and conquered India. Yeah. And some Porus or somebody, we don't have any recollection, anywhere a mention of a man called Porus. But we do know from Greek historians that Alexander died of a broken heart in Persia. He had conquered Persia. But he was supposed to come to India. Did he come to India? We have no records of his ever coming to India. So we were, But we always made war as the last most option. So Mahabharata, ultimately Krishna goes and tells Duryodhan, give 5 villages. Don't give, there are 5 brothers, one village for each. Don't give your kingdom. Don't give Indraprastha. Keep Indraprastha, keep Hastinapur. But let's not have a war. And he said, no, I will not give this space that you find in the needle pick, needle from the head of the needle. I won't even give that much land. And only then the war took place. And when Ram went and conquered Lanka, he appointed Ravan's brother as the king, coronated him, and then came. So our approach was different. So naturally, we didn't conquer this, we didn't conquer that. We didn't need to. People were eating out of our hands. They were getting educated by us. And like Hushu says, it's a case of a fantastic case of peaceful borrowing. We taught them karate, which is, we called it Kaleribattu in Kerala. It went to Shaolin in China. It was there called Wushu. Wushu in Chinese characters, if you read in Japanese, is karate. And today we are saying we're learning karate because the Japanese are teaching us.
Now, India has been the cradle of civilization, and as I am researching for my new book, where I'm researching that how the Native Americans had very common concept. In February, I might be going to Chile to meet the Mapuche tribe. They use Om as a symbol of attaining spiritual perfection. Now, coming back to our own community, American Hindu as well as Hindu in India community, we have been taught to appreciate Western civilization, again because of wrong history books that we have written, that how great was the Western civilization. And sometimes our children and our communities, they focus on ideals borrowed from the West. I have hardly seen any Indian community or Hindu community quoting Vyasdev, Narad Muni, Shukdev Goswami, all these great Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya. They have not quoted anyone, even Tathachari, who was the guru of Vijayanagar Empire, Raja Krishna Dev Rai. So where have we lagged, and why these real heroes have never been spoken about? Sometimes Shivaji Maharaj is successful because of his defeat, or even Maharaj Ranjit Singh, because they gave a successful military blow to the invaders. And do you think that the people only remember the military victories and not the philosophical victories that these acharyas have?
People only remember what the books written by the British are used. Some people ask me questions, why government should get into writing a history? We have to prescribe history textbooks for schools, for examinations, for colleges. And even in the United States, which is supposed to be a bastion of democracy, look at the amount of jhagda that takes place on how the history books should record Hinduism. Because, they may have decentralized into committees, whereas the Ministry of Education plays a central role because we have come after a long years of foreign rule. So we decided the government should do it. So unfortunately, during Jawaharlal Nehru's thing, anything that was Hindu, they just downplayed and made fun of. But the fact of the matter is that all these things you're telling is because we don't have a genuine history of India. And that's the reason. I told our government you should invite Rajiv Malhotra to India and let him form a team and then give them all the facilities. They'll write we need a textbook. We don't need research papers.
Correct.
We need a textbook for schools and we need a textbook for college BA honors courses of history.
Thank you. And one last question, Dr. Swamy, is
Yes.
that American or even the Western universities, including UK universities, English-speaking Western universities, generally they claim that India has to write correct history first before we accept that version, and it's a vicious cycle because the Indian universities want to get Harvard dollars, where the Hinduism is taught by a Christian pastor. Francis Clooney is a Christian pastor in Harvard University, and so I had a very frank conversation with all of them, and they said that it's the Indian government and they have to prescribe us which version to go for. If there is no such recommendation, then we go by what we think good or right. So again, the initiative has to come from India, and blaming the Western world for incorrect representation after the post-colonization period is not the solution. What do you have to say? And it totally gels with what you told me.
See, first, let's not get into the question of what religion should be of the author of a book.
Yeah.
Because we have in India Christians who have come from abroad, white Christians, who have written wonderful books.
That's right.
And there are 5-6 of them. Aurobindo Ashram has many of such people. So we just want books written which can trace its sources to our books, not their imagination.
Correct.
These like East India companies. After all, Max Muller is considered a great scholar, but he was a paid employee of the East India Company.
That's right.
So, and then in the case of Macaulay, he said very clearly, all the history books and all the Sanskrit books must be burnt. And we must make Indians, educate them and make them mentally accept that they will dress like Englishmen, they will eat like Englishmen. The only thing that they will have is their brown skin. Otherwise, they will be a brown Englishman. He says that openly. It's called the Minute on Education. So, therefore, my view is the history books, it should be written not by one person, it should be written by a team. And we have some, they are not well known in our society, but we have Muslims who have, written the dialogue for Ramayana for Doordarshan.
Exactly.
So, and after all, our DNA is the same. So, therefore, they mean their ancestors are Hindus.
That's right.
So, I would say that what we have to see is what sources are they. Today, the scientific evidence says there's no difference between a North Indian and South Indian as far as DNA is concerned.
That's right.
How can you talk about North is Aryan and South is Dravidian?
Yes.
You see, there's no word Aryan in our entire scripture. There's Arya. Arya just means a well-mannered person.
That's right.
Yeah, a well-mannered person. And Dravidian is a sandhi of two words, thra and vid, which means where the three coastlines meet, which is South India. So if you're from South India, you're Dravidian. If you're a gentleman, if you're a cultured person, you're an Aryan. You're an Arya Putra, not Aryan. We don't have word Aryan. That's Hitler's contribution. So I would say that let us be very clear. All we need is a history book, compulsory history books for prescription for syllabus, and the mindset will change. My own mindset, because I was brought up in America, to question. In India, we don't teach our students to question.
Yes.
Whatever the teacher dishes out, remember it and reproduce it.
Regurgitate it.
Yeah. So, therefore, I began to think independently. Well, where did this come from? Where did this come from? Our chronological dating is all bogus. And when one day it turned out that the Chinese revealed that their Buddhist traveler Fascian came to India on the 4th century AD, and Fascian had written about 11-12 books. And all these books, there's no reference to Vikramaditya and the great kings of India, who are supposed to be, according to British dating system, around 400. Samudragupta, Chandragupta, none of it. The Gupta Empire was, called Hindu Renaissance, but there is no reference
Zero.
How can that be? There's no reference to Chanakya. How can that be? When you say it is 4th century, because that dating is wrong.
Wrong. That's right.
And Fascian was correct in not mentioning them. In fact, he talks about ruins after ruins. And indeed, by 4th century, that Gupta Empire had disappeared. And so what was left was ruins.
Swamiji, you are so right, so right. Because in my own research, that I feel that coming from Srimad Bhagavatam, that Nanda Maharaj period happened 1,250 years after the Krishna left the planet, which pushes the Buddha's appearance date to almost 3,800 years from today. And this is just my research. I may be right or wrong. Now another just one.
Yeah, it's that Tibetans, you see, after Nirvana of Buddha, they had a rope and they put a knot for each year. And that research has been done, and they counted and came to the conclusion that Buddha's Nirvana was not in 400 BC, but in 1850 BC.
That is
So that fit with your estimate.
absolutely, absolutely. And Dr. Swamy, if you were here in studio, we would have offered you coffee. We have been speaking for a long time, but virtually, yes. One last point, and this is, and I don't want to denigrate anyone, but generally, when you are living in a society which goes by the, sometimes history is intricately connected with religion also. So when you say we are not a religion, we are a way of life, and when you're
Who
living,
says that?
I heard a lot of misconceptions. Many single leaders from India quote that Hinduism is a way of life, not a religion.
It's like a parrot.
Yeah, parrot. S. Radhakrishnan said it, and everybody is repeating without understanding. But when I go by Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, which I follow, you know, it's a dharma, a Sanatan dharma, which is maybe not be equal word for religion, but still it's governed by books. But when you say way of life, that means is mental speculation. It's totally
Yeah.
wrong.
Well, let me say that from first principles, we have all through Hindus have recognized two parts to our theology. One part we call as Shruti, God given, that is Vedas, Upanishads, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Puranas. All these are given to us as knowledge directly to the rishis who did tapas, and who then by memorization passed it on from generation to generation, and later on we wrote, just converted into Sanskrit books. The other part is called Smriti. Smriti means remembrance. And that is Manusmriti, Yajnavakal, Smriti, and so on. These are ways of life. So those who say Hinduism a way of life are relying on the Shruti, Smritis. They are not knowing anything about Vedas, they are not knowing anything about Upanishads and so on. And therefore, and in our theology, it is admitted that while you can't meddle with, amend the Shruti, that is the Vedas cannot be altered. It's God given. But this way of life is subject to amendment. So when people say Manu said like this, well, it's all go over. After Manu came Yajnavalkya. After that, Mitakshara. Now we say our Smriti is the constitution of India, which tells you the way of life. You can do this, you can't do this. Okay. So this way of life is the Englishman, in order to say that we don't have a structure. Of course, we Hindus, everything we do, the way we worship our mother and father, where the shishtachar between husband, wife, father and son, and mother and daughter, all these are prescribed. And that's a way of life. But there is no permanence to that. It can be amended according to the Kal.
So thank you, Swamiji. Today you spoke I mean, it's a pleasure to hear you, and we always honor to have you personally. I rely what you say, and also you gave me some new pointers also. Yajnavalkya Smriti, which is worth reading also, because just saying Manu Smriti and calling it exploitative by some people is not enough if they not read it. So thank you for coming and sharing your time. Do you have one message for all our people who are trying to treat Indian history as Sattology or history?
Well, learn Sanskrit, full stop.
Thank you. And
Everything will come automatically through that.
yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Swamy. And I'll give you
Yeah,
time back, and namaskar, and
that's good.
coming
Good.
to the show.